Hello, here to talk about economics today. I've been working on an economic theory for some years now, and I've got Blackboard here to assist me, but we'll get through a bit of content with some graphs and also a bit of not graph talking. So I guess in line with the broader system, the broader polar method that I've spoken about in other locations, there's a dual frame in which we can understand economic interactions, with that dual frame being composed of the parallel rivers of competition and cooperation. This, of course, being due to our being both separate and connected, our being individual and community, therefore motivated towards controlling our surrounds and also communing with our surrounds, parallel rivers, cooperation and competition. So I took this idea through uni, got myself a dual degree with economics and political science, and I came up there in the field of economics against this thing called neoclassical economics, which is a beautiful thing to behold. Neoclassical economics as compared to the broader liberal economic framework, which looks at everybody as separate and individual and competitive, which is what we're trying to reconsider here, especially that being the dominant framework wherein this neoclassical economics has been constructed. So neoclassical economics is mathematical economics, and it started off with the supply and demand graph, right? You know that one? Look, I'll even draw it quick. Price, quantity, demand. This is quantity. This is price. So at a low quantity, at a high price, and not many people want to buy it, low quantity. At a low price, lots of people demand the product. And so likewise we have an upwards facing supply curve. At a high price, everyone wants to sell it. At a low price, no one wants to sell it. So you get this here, market clearing price, the free competition, market equilibrium, crap. But anyway, that's what we started off with here with neoclassical economics. We had the classical theorists. I've rubbed it out already. We had the classical theorists, people like Adam Smith, who were like economic theorists. Smith, the invisible hand. If there's people pursuing their own interest, then they'll, through the natural forces of the market, they'll be led by an invisible hand towards everybody being better off. So you've got it in this graphical form, whereby the pure competition in economics is defined as providing the ideal equilibrium state, laissez-faire economics, etc. Let them do as they will. Free market economics with competitive capitalism. So anyway, this whole liberal framework has dominated the ideology for a while, not just in economics, but that's perhaps the most obvious example. There is communism, but we didn't get much past the classical theorists like Karl Marx in terms of the economic analysis, the numerical analysis supporting the communistic approach to understanding everybody cooperating together all the time has been radically undeveloped as compared to within the liberal framework. But still, you've got this majestic item called neoclassical economics, which is mathematical economics. And now what we want to do is we want to apply it to that framework where we are both competitive and cooperative, and see what we can come up with in terms of defining a new and wholly better economic method. So we're going to be looking at the microeconomics. Microeconomics is the markets for individual products, and we're also going to look at macroeconomics, which is aggregate economic activity, and how to define a macroeconomic ideal equilibrium as well, which is a massive problem for liberal economics. They just wing it, wing and prayer, wing and more like Satan worship, like that for the liberal economics. They're lost. But anyway, especially in macroeconomics. But anyway, so we have this thing. We're going to be looking at people cooperating and competing, right? So we're going to go through a few graphs, try and knuckle down the idea. So it might help to consider a bit the general framework for it first. So, all right, so no, we'll get there piece by piece. So we're looking at the tiering is an essential component of within a ideally structured, polar balanced socio-political, socio-economic system. So you've got small neighbourhood tiering up through villages, towns, cities, city-states. Like you have this tiering up to the global scale. I am, of course, an advocate for world government. So, okay, so we can look at individual products. So we're here in microeconomics, and we look at this is the number of people. And this is the efficient use. So we're looking at a particular product, and we're going to go, this is that's max efficiency. For this particular product, let's look at a washing machine. So within, this is a logarithmic scale. So starts off 1, 10, 50, 1,000, 10,000, million, whatever, just exponentially grows rather than just a linear progression of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So with the washing, well, let's say this is 30 people here. Let's say a washing machine, one person, okay, the efficiency's all right. It increases up to share it, maybe so many people, like that. So this is just pulling figures out of my head, whereas I haven't done any studies, but I'm just imagining that a washing machine here for one person, it's quite useful having the washing machine, the laundry space in your house, and so the washing machine, it depends on the person. It's quite efficient to have your own washing machine, but then the washing machine is for, if you have more people sharing the washing machine, you use the washing machine more efficiently. So you've reached it. We're going to assume for now that the transaction cost, the cost of engaging with people in the process of sharing, or we might actually have doesn't matter whether it's a competitive private business supplying washing machines to a few people, or it's a collectively organised cooperative process. Don't worry about that. We're just looking at the actual efficient use, and we're going to say that the cost of doing business is zero. So the cost of having to talk to your neighbours, zero. The cost of all this, so we're assuming all that's zero. We're going to say that for a washing machine, we're somewhere here between 0 and 30 people, there's going to be an efficient use for a washing machine. And then we're going to look at here at now we're going to look at a swimming pool. And we're going to find that the number is bigger because it's a expensive thing. You might find a couple of people want to have their own swimming pool here. You might find that after you get to this stage, there's too many people in the washing machine. This might be 2,000 people for a little swimming pool. It's just crowded all the time. It's not much fun in there because we've run out of space and we've run out of clean water. So that after a while it drops off. The efficiency increases up to a scale, the efficient use for the number of people, and then it drops off again. So it's the same for anything. We could look at the small swimming pool like that, and we could look at a big swimming pool. Efficiency goes up, then drops off again. We could look at an aeroplane. So it might be bigger than a swimming pool. With guessing things, we might look at a garden. We might have a garden for just a few people. Might have a tractor, more people, like that. So you've got all these different products that have a maximum efficient use based on the number of people that are using them. So it's an abstract sense at the moment. But what we're trying to show here is that there will be a time, say about here, we use a different colour just for novelty. About here, this chalk's hopeless. This one. And what we're going to find is at these scales, then the cost of having governance to support these things will be overridden by the benefits. So the benefit minus cost of establishing governance will be here. And the benefit is that with this governance, we enable the realization of all of these local efficiencies in the use of goods and services as compared to the liberal economic model, which looks at a lot of individuals and as we'll see, has encouraged us to live as isolated individuals, tending to sit in cars for hours after hour. And unfortunately, we lose all sorts of efficiencies, for example, in the use of shared facilities at the small scale. This might be the games room, this might be the common kitchen, this might be the mini chook farm, this might be the bread oven, this might be all sorts of small scale micro businesses and collaborative enterprises here that because we don't have that small scale governance under that liberal system, we lose out on all this efficiency. So there's a point whereby the establishing that governance is good for us. The benefits outweigh the costs. So we're like, yes, we'll have that governance thanks to enable all of this efficiency. And that again, will that be a tiered pattern? There'd be a tiering within the governance from that neighbourhood scale, village scale, town scale, city-state, we call it the city-state scale, like that. So you get this tiered governance to realise these efficient use of goods and services. So we're so there's obviously a cost to these things, but we're factored into these things where we're better off based on our preferences. We prefer to realise this efficiency. There's a cost to having this governance. We might think, I don't want to talk to my neighbours, or we might there's administrative cost, there's cost of establishing bureaucracies, etc. like that. There's you don't want to feel like your neighbours are looking at you or anything like that. And then, so there's you might get all sorts of negative associations with having this governance, but then you also get these benefits. So you get a point wherein the benefits are going to outweigh the costs. So at that scale, that's where we prefer the governance. And I'm going to suggest that it's going to be somewhere in this range here of maybe between like 25 and 50 people or more, depending on the various factors such as population density, the people's cultural preference, we could probably list the factors. I hadn't thought of that earlier, but there'd be factors of why it would be bigger or smaller. We might live in an apartment block, or we live on a spaced out big farm, whatever. Then so the scale will change depending on the particular circumstances, but there'll be an ideal scale wherein we'll be better off building this governance. So we end up with this tiered structure of governance. Rub this one out now. So again, there's some of that's collaborative, some of that's private enterprise. We're structuring both. So the framework that I look at that I think is makes sense is supportable by logic and in terms of people's preference is that the cooperative aspect to the economy becomes tiered up through that tiered up through that governance system at local scales. You have local activity and also local governance. You have a pattern of interactivity between people, but the actual formal cooperative aspect to the economy, you can do things like provide local jobs, to directly support the welfare of, look after granny, provide homes for people, etc. You can build this welfare supporting capacity into the cooperative aspect of the economy, and then the competitive aspect to the economy swims around on top of that. So people doing what they want, buy, sell, whatever you want. You can have a cooperative chicken farm, or you can have a privately owned, locally focused chicken farm. As you've got this preference for people, but we're going to be talking more about that as we go on. So anyway, what we're looking at now is the degree of interactivity, interdependence within the community with people, how much they want. Okay, so I love this graph. So simple. This one you have the benefits minus costs. Ben minus costs. That's the benefits minus costs of starting a new enterprise, be that a cooperative enterprise or a competitive enterprise. Might be setting up a new swimming pool, might be making some tennis courts, might be a whole big grand thing or a theaterette, who knows what it is. We're talking at different scales as well. Might be buying a swimming pool, buying an aeroplane, or running an airline. Or different enterprise. But no, we're specifically looking at more local things here, because you tend to get those bigger things anyway at the bigger scale. This is $0. This is the level of social capital. The level of social capital. So this is the degree of interdependence within the community. We're looking small scale. So the pattern of people interacting together, including with buying and selling stuff, associated governance, so you can support cooperative aspects to the economy. You can have infrastructure in place where, like, there could be a building where people can put their stuff that they produce privately and just sell it in the local shop, whatever it's called. And so you get this pattern of interactivity and interdependence within the community. And the more you've got that there, then the easier it is to set up a new enterprise. If you've already got the governance in place, so you want to set up a swimming pool, if you've got the governance in place, okay, we can administer someone to look after the swimming pool, and we can organise all that stuff. We can talk to them. So if you now in the isolated neighbourhoods where you might not talk to many of your neighbours, or you might even cross the road to avoid them sometimes, or you just get in your car, and we're looking at a socio-economic vacuum. There's no governance, there is no economic activity. People get in their cars to drive to work. Some of them work from home, but again, it's not locally focused. We're not talking about interdependent social capital at those within the community. So these costs minus benefits minus costs, they start down here, cruise up there and go like that. So what this is telling us is that this level, at this level, it's not an equilibrium. At this level, we find an equilibrium point. So what happens here is, at a low level of socio-economic capital, socio-economic. Then the costs of setting up a new enterprise. For example, you want to plant an apple orchard and you want it to be on the communal patch of land. You've got to set up the community legal structure, the community financial fund. You've got to talk to all the neighbours. You've got to get them to have gone to a bunch of meetings. You've got to set up all the governance. You've got to set up you've got to say, okay, we want to set up an apple orchard. Who's in? Everybody's got, I've got on the drive to my job, thanks. So the costs outweigh the benefits if you've got a low level of socio-economic capital. So you trend from that point backwards, you trend to having zero socio-economic capital, because every time someone thinks, I want to do something with my neighbourhood, then it's like the costs outweigh the benefits, so nothing happens. Less tends to vacuum the economic activity as well as the broader pattern of interdependence between people from out of the community. But then after you get past this point here, with this higher degree of socio-economic capital, enterprises start becoming more and more feasible. So you've got the swimming pool, as I keep saying, you got your tennis court, you got your apple orchard, you got your farm, you got your greens garden, you got your shop where people can put their privately produced eggs and bread, and there's someone cruising around on their push bike selling turnips that they produce to their neighbours, etc., etc. Once there's this pattern of all of these things happening, then it supports people to tap into that pattern. One new enterprise, another new enterprise, another new enterprise cruises up here like this. More enterprises, each one more and more realisable. Benefits minus costs. Benefits exceed costs further and further. This is abstracted, so it's not going to be the same for any. Can't think of any old random idea and hope it's going to succeed. But randomised, you can see that the benefits will exceed the costs because they're supported by the level of socio-economic capital within the society. So you cruise along, and then up to this point, the costs start outweighing the benefits again. You're running out of space in the community. You are running out of time. You don't want to see your neighbours anymore. So it's like, oh, hey dude, let's set up a whatever it's going to be. Let's do a wind farm to subsidise the something else, and everyone's like, I'm not going to have a wind farm on my roof. You fool, back away. It's too much. The cost to me is too much. There's no more room to put in another wind farm. So the costs are too much, and so at this point, so you trend to this level of socio-economic capital within the society. This is the level where people prefer for their society to be based on the preferences that people have. This is the benefits minus costs associated with the way that people value these things. And this is the equilibrium level. This is the level where we want to be. But look at liberal free competition, liberal free trade. You end up down here, zero. This is the free trade equilibrium, zero socio-economic capital. You look at the cooperative competitive balanced level of social capital, where you have governance to support a pattern of interactivity between people with buying and selling, cooperative and competitive aspects to the economy, and you have people living much more localised lifestyles that's much more sustainable, because people have local jobs, local destinations, probably local friends. You can look after granny locally, the kids. You could have like a little, what was I saying? You've got that socio-economic capital in the society, and you have this pattern where we want to be with associated governance, and it's sustainable. People don't have to drive cars so much because you can have local jobs and welfare support within the society that's sustainable. And you can tier it up, as we were saying before. So then at the city-state scale, you could make a reasonable argument that city-state will be largely self-reliant. So anyway, we're moving on from that. One more graph I want to look at. I lost track for a sec there, but we're still on it. So we have this one here. What we're looking at is microeconomic analysis for the related to the value of having a socio-economic capacity within the neighbourhood, how it translates into a value on products. So here we got another beautiful graph. This is a microeconomic analysis, but we can also turn it into a macroeconomic analysis, which is something that macroeconomics in general should be. They don't have any pants at all, those people. So hopefully people in general take this on board. And here you've got a framework for understanding a macroeconomic equilibrium. Doesn't require growth, etc. It's just better, it's sustainable. And here we go. Here we have price. Here we have quantity. Like before, this is a supply and demand graph, but with a difference. Here we're going to use an example, the traditional example that I've used all these years is for eggs. This here is going to be price of egg, imported egg. Import egg price. Egg price. That's a dollar symbol. Okay, so this is the price of buying an egg in a supermarket. So this is the supply, an example of a supply curve. In this case, it's flat. We're going to say that the price of eggs remains constant. Then when you buy them from the imported from the supermarket. So we're talking about a neighbourhood or a village here, and its capacity to supply local eggs. So you're going to find that, again, we're abstracting it. This is the supply, local egg supply price. Now here what we're finding is at a high price, at a low quantity, it's going to cost our village egg producer, be they cooperative or competitive, it's going to cost a lot to produce just a few eggs, and as the village egg producer is producing more, the price is going to come down. You've got some efficiencies of scale. You're obviously not going to meet up with factory farming over here in terms of efficiencies of scale, but you're coming down in price as you're supplying so many. But then what we're going to say is that there is a value to having local economics. This is something that free trade theory, free market theory has utterly failed to register, that people have a preference for locally supplied goods and services. So that translates into a value. So for the local egg, if the eggs are exactly the same in every other way, we're still willing to pay more for the local egg. Some person will have will hold a lower preference for that local egg. Some person will have a higher preference for that local egg, but averaged over the population, it's not zero. People have a preference for local eggs. So here you might find that this is the local egg supply. Some people buy some if this business is functional at all, it's probably not, because it's been vacuumed out by free trade economics. There's really very limited egg supply at the neighbourhood village scale. And then this will be the This would be the demand for eggs. This is demand, D for demand. At this point here, you might find this many people buy the local egg at that price, and then the rest of these people are buying these eggs at this price here, and this is the total quantity of eggs. Some of them are buying them at that price, and the rest of the people are buying them at that imported egg price. But what we're saying is that there's value to local egg supply. So there's this thing. What we're going to say is that if everybody's importing their egg from the supermarket, then this business here doesn't function at all effectively. We just drew an example where it does, but in general terms it doesn't. So, but there's we can call the loss of value, because people prefer the local eggs or the local bread. They prefer to have a level of socio-economic interdependence within their community in general. They'd prefer to have governance capacity in support of cooperative and competitive, locally focused businesses and enterprises in both supply and demand. People have a preference for a degree of local socio-economic capital, as we saw. People have a preference for local goods and services, as we're seeing right now. But none of this price is counted into liberal economic theory. So you have this thing called comparative advantage. Had this classical economic theorist called David Ricardo produced this thing called comparative advantage, where it doesn't mean if one country's got an absolute advantage in the production of absolutely everything, still for this other country, if they focus on what they're relatively best at producing, relatively best as compared to the other country, and that they produce that and sell it to the other country, and the other country focuses on what they're relatively best at producing and sell it back to them, then you have a comparative advantage whereby if the cost of trade is zero, then it's efficient for everybody to produce what they're relatively best at. But sadly, the cost of trade is definitely not zero. But as much as generation after generation, we've had governments dismantling barriers to trade because they're costly. We've got one cost that is just not counted in the equation, which we're talking about here. That is the cost to the value associated with having a diverse, interdependent, local economy with associated socio-economic capital, which is sustainable, enables participatory democracy. That was that one I was trying to mention before, but lost track. We have there's a value associated with having all that capacity, and that translates into a price value, but that price value is not counted, and the value that we hold in this having that capacity within our communities is not counted. So we end up with this situation whereby the capacity within our neighbourhoods and villages becomes progressively vacuumed out until we end up with socio-economic vacuums at the small neighbourhood scale. And comparative advantage, liberal, free trade, free market theory, which dominates the world, does not even count it as a loss. We're not even counting it as a loss, as our neighbourhoods and villages are made increasingly unsustainable. Individuals are increasingly isolated. Everybody gets fat because there's some disconnect between the food and the people, although that's some sort of, maybe going a bit far talking about that, but the psychological problems everywhere. Obesity is going through the roof. All these problems in the society associated with isolation, not to mention climate change. Everybody's sitting in a car, driving all over the place. And people are actually better off based on this value, that they can realise the value of this capacity within the local economy that supports the tiered up, participatory, can make it more directly democratic governance, etc. People are better off for having that stuff, even if the egg price is a bit cheaper, because we find the value is being lost. So there's this thing. It's called a Pigouvian tax. I could have drawn it a bit closer, but we're just going to say that this, we'll put it here. This one here is we're going to weight up this price here. This is called a Pigouvian tax, which they actually taught me in year 1 of with Economics 1010, where they were talking about the supply and demand graph. They said these things called externalities. So the example they give is that there's a boot manufacturer, and the boot manufacturer is polluting the river. So when they charge for the price of their boot, to make an efficient outcome, they should be charging for the price of the pollution to the river. So that's added to the price here. This is the actual efficient price if you count in the price of these externalities, and that will drive back the back to this point here. That will drive back the demand, push up the price, drive up demand, and then this extra bit of price here, this area here, which is dollars times quantity, this is a dollar value. This will then go into repairing the river, compensating the fisher people, etc., planting trees, whatever they do. So this is called a Pigouvian tax, after Pigou. Can't think of his first name, but he was a cool character. So anyway, that's mainstream economic theory these days. It wasn't 20 years ago, but it is now. But what we've done here is we've applied it to the loss that is associated with the local economic activity. If people are importing eggs, it's starting to undermine the egg production capacity within the neighbourhood and the village. So there's an opportunity cost that's being incurred. You might think one person buy their egg at the supermarket, well, whoop-de-doo, good luck to them. But what's happening is everyone else is paying the cost, because it drives the local egg suppliers out of business. And as we saw before with that other graph, where once the egg supplier goes out of business, next it's the bread supplier goes out of business, next it's our capacity to build a nice apple orchard, next it's our capacity to make a swimming pool and go swimming in the summer. One thing after another, all this socio-economic capital, all this diverse economic capacity, the capacity to govern ourselves, all of this goes out the window based on this externality here, and this that's currently not valued, that has not been valued in free trade economic theory, liberal economic theory, based on the idea that we're all separate individuals in this natural competition with one another, which is absolute garbage. We're both cooperative and competitive. So anyway, once we weight this into the price, we get a different outcome, right? So this is one of my key policies here. I've had this one for 15 years. I knew it before I ever went to uni, and uni with this neoclassical analysis has only supported my assumption that a locality tax is going to lead to an efficient outcome. What that is, a locality tax is a system of trade tariffs applied tiered to the neighbourhood scale. So that if someone buys an egg, imports an egg from another city, they will pay a trade tariff to their neighbourhood, another trade tariff to their village, another trade tariff to their town, and another trade tariff to their own city. And in paying those trade tariffs, they're actually better off. One, you'll be increasing the capacity of local eggs that you prefer, but two, you'll be supporting the local economy to be building and maintaining that socio-economic capacity. So in doing that, you're realising a bunch of other benefits. So you gain a cost here, you gain a benefit from paying for a cheap egg, but you're suffering the cost associated with the dismantling of your neighbourhoods and villages and all the infrastructure that rightfully belongs in them and that you actually want in them. So you're suffering that opportunity cost and that repeated economic opportunity cost vacuums all the life out of the neighbourhoods and villages and towns. And this is where we're at. Very little socio-economic capital in our neighbourhoods and villages and towns. So we're thinking of a system to fix that. And amongst those here, we have the locality tax. So this is the weighted price here. So we might, however much it is, this is what we're weighting the price up here. Might be 10 cents in the dollar, just to pick a number out of my head. We don't need to test these things, of course. It's just an abstract theory at the moment rather than tested. It can be tested. These things can be measured to a dollar value, and it's also going to shift. There's going to be, depending on the people's understanding of how it works, people might say to start with, some people idealistically will say, hey, let's put 50 cents on the egg. Some people will say, oh, I want 2 cents on the egg. I want 0 cents on the egg. So the level of tariff, based on people's preferences, their preferences will shift in relation to the actual outcome. So we test it in the computer lab, test it in set up test sites, but it's a process of adapting this thing over time to set the level at the right level. But here we've got 10 cents in their dollar, and what happens now, we're just going to adjust this one a little bit. We're going to say this is the price of the egg, the local egg here, sorry. This is the weighted egg price. This is the local egg supply price. So then at this price, we might find that this many people are buying the local eggs, and only this small amount of people here are buying the imported eggs. So this is the imported egg sales. This whole area here is the LE local eggs. So this point here is all of these businesses have been stimulated up to this point, and the trade tariff revenue is just in here like this. So this area here, which is again quantity by price, so this is 10 cents by, this might be 50 eggs or 100 eggs or 1,000 eggs. Quantity times the price will give a dollar value. This goes to the neighbourhood, to the village as revenue, which it then goes into supporting that local capacity, including local egg supply. So here we have if we value the price of that, what I was calling the externality there, then we end up with a very different outcome in terms of the what gets sold and what gets bought. And we have a capacity to build a lot more economic, a lot more diverse economic enterprises, productive enterprises of all kinds, be they privately managed or collectively, collaboratively organised. And we end up with a much more preferable outcome. At this outcome here, this is not just the so what we're talking about is we're talking about a macroeconomic equilibrium whereby we don't need it to grow, because we'll go back to this graph up here again. We've had enough of this one, I think. Let me just run through it one more time. It looks a bit complicated here. This is the demand curve. This is how many eggs people want to buy. Again, there would be elasticity of demand, they call it. This will shift in relation to actual circumstances, but we've just got an abstracted one here, the demand for eggs. And then this is the price of local egg supply. This is the price of imported eggs. This is the weighted price of imported eggs. So this is where we'll end up here producing more local eggs. If we weight this price of imported eggs, it will make local egg production much more likely to succeed, viable. Yeah, so what I was going to say, I'm just rubbing it out, but what I was going to say is that we can apply it to a whole bunch of different things effectively. This is the price of everything that's being imported, and then this is the weighted price of everything that's being imported, and then this is the supply price, the price of supply of local goods and services, including with governance. And so then we can apply that whole thing to an aggregate of all microeconomic activity, still coming out with an equilibrium that will be very different to the free market equilibrium. I probably shouldn't have rubbed this out yet, but anyway, nearly there. Okay, so back to this one. This is the socio-economic capital here. This is the benefits minus costs again of starting a new enterprise. This is the free trade equilibrium where there's no socio-economic capital whatsoever. This is the preferred level of socio-economic capital here. This is the zero price where up to this point it's good to produce another enterprise. Beyond that point, no more enterprises. Back here again, this one up to this point, it's less enterprises until there's zero happening. Beyond that point, more enterprise. This is fun, community fun. Up to this point here, oh no, this sucks again. Okay, so what we're talking about is a macroeconomic equilibrium, an equilibrium within the broad society. So what we want to be able to talk about is a mature economy. So rather than an economy, as is currently the case, that needs to grow in order to be healthy, if the current economy is not growing, the liberal economy doesn't grow, then it collapses. So we find this situation where you go through boom and bust cycles, you have recessions where some people go out of a job, then oh no, everyone cuts back on supply, and so more people go out of jobs. So the government's got to try and you had this counter-cyclical demand management whereby you've got monetary rates for the Reserve Bank and you've got fiscal government spending, either more or less, depending on whether you want to stimulate or decrease the economic output based on whether it's overheating and driving inflation or going slow and putting people out of work and unemployment, etc. So you've got this boom and bust cycle, but there's a problem. It's faced widespread criticism, this whole concept of the economy needs to keep growing in order to be healthy, because really there's got to be enough stuff in the world already. It's certainly in this developed world, who needs another thing from the shop, really? More clothes. Everyone's got so many clothes, it's crazy. Everyone's got cars, everyone's got furniture. We just don't need that much more stuff. But the other thing is we're hitting the natural limits to growth in many cases, which economic growth tends to drive environmental destruction, including in the context of climate change. So, for example, and you get these very irregular outcomes. So, driving a car, building bigger roads are both going to drive economic growth, but both of them are they're negative outcomes. So you get all these strange outcomes which result in growing all the way towards living in a big dome underneath the crashing waves, and it's like, yes, the economy's growing. It's a rubbish system. So what we want to do is be able to define a mature economy that does not need to grow in terms of its ability to maintain people's welfare and for the economy to be healthy. So the key theme I mentioned before in relation to that is that the cooperative aspect of the economy should be robust and of sufficient scope, robust enough and of sufficient scope that it is able to support the basic welfare requirements of the society, including supplying basic essential goods and services, and in terms of providing employment. So there's a number of factors associated with that. One, we have to have the desired degree of socio-economic capacity within our, tiered up through our society, from the small scale through the broad scale. And we have to have, at that scale, we've got, you want to be able to provide employment for people who want it, and to provide goods and services in that cooperative system, so that then if there's shocks to the economy, so for example, if the price of, I don't want to say it, I was going to say oil was a classic example, but it feels disrespectful. But anyway, if the price of oil currently, which we burn along with coal, we burn about 30 million cubic metres of it every day around the world. It's a 10-storey building. Take you an hour to walk around it, 10-storey building deep. Set the match to it. That's how much of that stuff we use. Definitely affecting our climate, as we see with, for example, the 120 metres of ocean level rise that happened up to about 7,000 years ago. We see that the climate is fragile and we are impinging on it. Climate change is real, but anyway, I've probably gone a bit too far there as well. So I'm just saying that there's at this level that we can define this macroeconomic equilibrium, we can say that it is ecologically sustainable, we can say it's welfare supporting, we can say it's got the desired degree of socio-economic interdependence tiered through the system, which is able to provide employment, it's able to provide necessary goods and services. And so at that point, if there's a price rise in the cost of some essential input, or if there's some other shock, like say a big earthquake to the system, that then there's also enough flexibility, as well as that scope and scale of the cooperative system, that it's able to absorb people into the system, so that it can provide that employment and maintain the necessaries without needing to grow. So that framework like that for understanding a mature economy, I think, is also got a lot of legs. I think everything that I've said here in terms of economic theory has a lot of legs and is valid and correct. So we're looking from, they have a couple of good theorists that we built from in relation to this theory. There was Ronald Coase, stuck a big nail in the coffin of free market economics when he said that because of transaction costs, free competition is almost never efficient. Instead, you need institutional form to support people to transact together. Otherwise, they will suffer high levels of transaction costs and resultant inefficiency. So institutional form is shorthand for governance, collaborative processes. The other thing that we saw was someone called Elinor Ostrom, who's also a great person and an economist. Not quite an economist, but won the Nobel Prize for Economics. She told us that we're looking at the tragedy of the commons. So what she said was that there is a way that common pool resources can be effectively and sustainably governed in everyone's interest, and that wherein if we apply these strategies, and she did a lot of testing with computer labs and also looked at a lot of empirical studies, and she suggested that there's some systems we can use that will support the sustainable use of common pool resources, but that if we don't have these techniques in place, then we'll end up with the tragedy of the commons, which is sadly widespread still. So for example, with overfishing of the Earth's oceans, the deforestation of the world's forests, the the burning of fossil fuels, applying carbon into the atmosphere. These are all common pool resources that are being undermined because they're being ineffectively governed. And so she's key to that. So what we've done here is we've said that the potential socio-economic capacity tiered up through neighbourhoods, villages and towns, the value of that potential, is a common pool resource. And as if everybody's going, I'm going to buy my own egg, I'm going to buy my own washing machine, I'm going to have, probably not, but might have my own swimming pool, maybe I'm going to have a tennis court and the rest of you can not off. All these people who are doing things for themselves, which is no blame to them, because the system has made it effectively impossible either for producers or suppliers to operate local economics, to engage in local economic activity. The free market, free model, liberal economics has made it effectively impossible. So even if you want to buy your own swimming pool, whatever it is, then it's but whatever happens, but the individuals pursue their own economic activity. Each time they take a little bit for themselves, it destroys the common pool for everyone else. People, individuals are not to blame, but the system is structured so that everybody gets a little bit for me, a little bit for me, a little bit for me, and then the potential of the socio-economic capacity is consistently undermined, driven back till we end up with zero. And at this point, we find we've got a growth economy that is not sustainable. We've got no gardens. It's time we get ourselves back to the garden. And we've got, at this stage, we've got no governance. We've got no participatory governance. Brisbane, where I live, has got 1.25 million people for the most local level of governance. I suggest that should be the fourth tier of governance, with much more people looking after themselves and with one another, with higher levels of local socio-economic capacity and self-reliance, production of electricity and managing of wastes and production of all necessary goods and services, lots of luxuries as well. No reason why we can't reduce our economic growth substantially but still be better off. A lot of that is in terms of realising that local economic potential. Anyway, I think I've probably talked around most of that, probably repeated myself numerous times in relation to all sorts of it, but yeah, there's a few good graphs, and yeah, hope you have a great day, and I'll try to remember to look at the green dot some of the time it happened. The rest of the time I've been looking at myself. Okay, have a good day.